Hello, beautiful souls. This is Energy Speaks Podcast. Your host, Catriel. Today we have a special guest. Her name is Kristin Wolf. And just in case you hear a little bit of dogs and wolves in the background, she's going to be talking about ancestral healing from the shamanic perspective. Welcome, Kristin.
Thank you so much, Catriel. It's so good to be here. I'm so excited to be talking about this, especially on Memorial Day. I think it's a really important time to bring this discussion into light and talk about what it can do on a personal level and on a collective level.
I agree. That memorial energy of remembering our forefathers and mothers and their service and what that means, within our DNA and beyond.
Exactly. Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit. Yeah.
I was just going to say, would you like me to say a little bit about myself? So my name, again, is Kristin Wolf, and I actually own a metaphysical and crystal shop here in Minnesota. My shop is called Magic Mushrooms in the Crystal Garden, and I am also the owner and operator of the Dreaded Nana, which is a crystal live show, and I do a lot of teaching on that crystal live show. And my journey has led me to crystal energy healing, and sort of all along this path has been this underlying shamanic journey for me. And so at the end of the day, whatever I do from a healing perspective, I'm always really pulling from the shamanic community, trying to learn as much as I can about how that can help heal the self. Wow. And so that's a little bit about me and my background.
Has this always been a part of you? No. Okay.
No. Very, very interesting story for me, actually. I was 20 years a retail manager, actually. And so the last thing I ran was the 7th worst Walmart in the country. And I got sick, Katrina. I got sick from emotional things that I didn't work through in my life, setting in as disease, and ended up being disabled from that, and realized now, 3 years later, why that all happened. Because shamanism is not something that ever just is like, okay, today I'm going to study it and become a shaman. It's sort of something that's given to you as illness, and you on your healing journey start to be awakened to those gifts. And so that's what's been happening for me over the last 3 years. And so my spirituality, my belief system has shifted so much. And I just love to be able to share it. So
yeah, that is incredible. And it's really, I'm really glad you're on here today. I'm Jewish, and it's so interesting how parallel shamanism is to Judaism. It's just a different culture, and I'm sitting back, seeing the comparisons. It's so amazing.
It is. I think, that was one of the important messages that I sort of wanted to bring to the table today, is that at the end of the day, I think it's more about finding the similarities in our belief system. And once we can get to that, we start to heal the collective.
Amen.
So it's really important that we do see that a lot of the things that we teach, a lot of the things that we believe, a lot of the underlying messages, regardless of what you call your religion, is love. If it wasn't love, then why would we practice it?
That's true. I love that.
If it was all, I don't know. So I think this is just a beautiful way, the two of us having come from different backgrounds, having experienced different religion, and then to be able to come together spiritually and say, hey, listen, it's all about seeking to understand and embrace and accept.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons that I created this podcast is like, there's a safe space for us all to share our truth and see how similar we really are, you know?
Absolutely, absolutely. So ancestral healing for me, it sort of came into play by accident. Just something that I guess we sort of do it with Memorial Day here, but we don't really do like a practice around it. What I would say like actual practice where we're, individually sending light and love to each of our individual ancestors and, things that we're doing more on a daily basis to acknowledge our connection to our past so that we can heal for our future. And so, just having studied the shamanism aspect, like this really started to come into play for me. And I want to start out by saying that there's many ways to honor your ancestors, but all of them are just ideas and stories that we share. They're always from someone else's perspective. So whatever we share today, Catriel, do you agree is like, they're just my stories. This is how I do it. But there are so many different ways that you could do it, and there is no right or wrong way. It's the way that suits you the best.
I agree so much.
Yeah, I mean, it's just at the heart of this discussion, I think, is understanding that your practice around ancestral healing should and could be drawn from this conversation. But at the end of the day, spirituality is such an individual thing. There's no two people on this planet that have the exact same relationship with their God. And so it's sort of like if you have siblings, you have a relationship with your siblings. It's not the same as your other siblings' relationship with those siblings. It's always individual because it's framed by your experience. And so these things that we talk about today, take from it what resonates with you and then leave what does not. Totally. But just know that at the end of the day, doing some kind of practice around ancestral healing is and can be very important to your own healing journey.
Thank you.
You are welcome.
I'm really excited.
So I have an outline here of things that like to talk about, and then like do you have any questions so far? I just outlined a few things here, and if you have any questions that come up, let me know.
I'll ask you if one comes up. How's that?
Perfect. So I thought I would start with, why do I practice ancestral healing?
I love it.
So there's a few reasons. Now, again, this is from my perspective, but there are a few reasons why I personally practice it. And the very first one, and a good place here to understand, you are the only person you can heal. And so ancestral healing for me is about my self-healing because it's so much to do with forgiveness. And so when I practice with the intention of letting go of things that no longer serve me. My belief is that it also does some healing on soul level for the people that you're sending healing to. And so this is, again, where belief systems may be a little bit different, but we can all see that sending forgiveness to somebody who maybe did things in our current situation, in our current life, attached to us energetically and created some discord in our lives. So that's the first reason. Do you have any questions around that one, Catriel?
Okay, so something came up while you were talking, especially at the soul level. I've heard it talked about that, things stem out from us seven generations back and 7 generations forward. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that. And you know what's happening even bigger than that? Actually, I had this question come up yesterday in a live show that I was doing about ancestral healing. So when we start a generation of people who are taught to heal their ancestral lines like that, not only does it heal that 7 generations, but it creates the practice for the future generations, which means that will continue.
Ooh, I felt
and
that.
what happens, I'm gonna like circle back like weird here, but because I'll talk about the collective healing, but it sort of fits here, because if you had a whole generation of people doing this ancestral healing that ends up healing self, if every single individual on the planet was working on healing themselves, the collective would be healed.
That's powerful.
It is. It's not easy. It says really easy. It does really hard, but it's true. If we all could just be thrilled and happy with ourselves every single morning, then that's the way the planet would be. That's the way the earth would be. Every human would be that way. So, every single person who wakes up to practices like these, and there are many, but this is just one of them. Every single person who starts to have some faith in these processes ends up being a person that helps heal that. So yeah, it's huge. And the 7 generations thing, absolutely, is huge. Yeah.
It's so cool because of the fact that we're all puzzle pieces, and if we do the work, to really heal ourselves, then it benefits everyone.
It truly does. Yeah, because it changes if you come from a place of healing all the time, total another podcast we could get into, but basically we want to go to this place where we resonate the frequency of love, where we get to the point where we're so healed that it doesn't matter whether everybody else is healed, we are. And every single person got to that point, then that's the frequency we would be at, and it would be just a really, really beautiful place to be. So it's good that we're doing the work, that we're having these discussions, and that we're starting to bring to light some of these practices that have been done. And these practices are done really well in some other cultures, but not to the extent where we're creating the self-healing piece of it. I think there's still work to be done, even in cultures like the Mexican culture, with the Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos. I can't speak Spanish, so that was a really bad pronunciation. I apologize. But they do a better job, but it's still only one day a year, like ours, and so we still need to, it's a practice. It's something that continues.
So when
the second, go ahead, sorry.
So when you practice, do you have a specific culture in mind, or do you really channel our culture? Everything that is interwoven within you. I mean, I guess that's a yeah in a sense, but do you get what I'm asking?
Yeah, I practice some different ways. And I think this will answer the question, but Perfect. Let me know if it doesn't quite answer the question. But there's different types of ancestral healing that I practice. Again, this is going to be different because it's coming from my space of spirituality, but some of it, everyone would resonate with, and then just take the pieces that fit for you. But I practice, first of all, my ancestors in my current lifetime.
Okay.
And so I have an altar set up in my house that is for ancestral healing. And because I'm a crystal energy healer, a lot of my pieces are crystals. I teach using crystal skulls as a representation for the healing that you need to do in your current life, or any any healing that you need to do, but you can have different pieces on your altar that represent different people. So for instance, I have pieces on my altar that are crystals that represent my grandparents, and so they have their own piece, and when I'm doing healing with them, I can hold that, energetically send them that healing through that crystal. And so that's one of the practices. Then we can also do healing, and I do healing for ancestral land. So like where my house is. And I heal the ancestors of the land that have lived here before. And so like I often find things like arrowheads and stuff on my property here in Minnesota. And so I do a lot of healing for that culture and for the things that happened when we moved in here and took over, not we personally, but our ancestors moved in, many of them. And I actually have an Ojibwe man that lives with me, and his grandparents were interpreters for the Civil War. And, really interesting backstory. But on my altar, I have a picture of them because they're my ancestral ancestors. So, and there's so many different ways to do it. You can ask me, we can get into that in a little while, I guess. But for me, I would say the other things that I heal are things that I feel connection to. So I do believe in past life. This is where we're not all going to see eye to eye on that, but that's just my belief system. Spiritually, that's where I come from. And I believe that I know some of my other experiences. And so I do healing to heal the things that happened to me in those times. And so I don't only have the people who lived here before, but also where I've lived before. And then the other piece, and you can pull in whatever is important to you, but I was thinking when I was talking to you, like the other thing we need to do is heal on a spiritual level. So for instance, I was raised as a Lutheran, so Christian, and we always had to talk about how we believed in the Catholic Church, and that always when I was growing up, I didn't really resonate with that very well, just knowing what I knew. And then also this idea that our Old Testament is Jewish, right? It's the story of things before Jesus, and then we brought in Jesus. So when I think about healing along spiritual lines, but by that I mean like healing some of those stories that are ancestral to us from a spiritual standpoint, where bad things were happening to people.
Wow.
And sending healing to those individuals, like a Cain and Abel story, and healing some of those things, because there's really some bad, icky stories. Like in the Christian faith, Jesus was killed. I mean, those are all things that I think, along a spiritual line, when we can start to understand we need to heal that piece of our belief system so that we can heal that from happening again.
I agree. Wow. That's really complex and really cool.
It can be. Yeah.
You're painting a really beautiful picture that I've never necessarily looked at it from that perspective. It was more piece by piece instead of the broad picture.
Yeah. I mean, it's just there's, and here's where you start to talk about there's no right or wrong way to do this. There's no, it has to resonate with you. So what I say, it resonates with me, and I like to share it, but we need to do what's actually take it back to the real reason you're doing this, healing yourself. For me, healing along spiritual lines, I always look at religion, no offense to anybody, but as one of the most evil things in the world because it created so much war. It created so much hatred. It created so much misunderstanding of each other. And so this is where I say, for me, it makes more sense to like take the stories for the value of their, I'll give you an example because sometimes it's easier to do that. So, I mean, Mother Mary in the Christian faith, this woman who was the virgin birth of Jesus, right? In that, we have this woman who sacrificed her son. She's a goddess archetype to me. She's wow, that's the ultimate sacrifice of a mother, to give her son for something that was greater than herself. And so we look to her for what she was, which was compassion, understanding, and understanding, healing the collective. We send healing to that woman for the things that she suffered. But we also are healing ourselves, because when we're children hearing these stories, what are we thinking about these stories? How does that have an impact on you and shape who you are?
That's true. That's very true.
They're not all these, some of these stories are, you hear them as a child and you're like, that's what you believe to be true. It can actually hurt people. And so once we heal those things in our spirituality and our belief system, we start to heal ourselves as well. And we start to hope that we can move forward to a place where, again, we all come from a place of acceptance and love for one another, regardless of what our perceptions are.
Wow. It kind of brought something up for me. When I was in world religions class in college, I really saw how powerful stories really are. And it was brought up when the professor spoke about Abraham sacrificing his son on the altar. And did you know, in Judaism and, of course, Christianity, that son is Isaac? But in Islam, that son is Ishmael. And I said, whoa. It's so interesting because stories hold a lot of energy. And most of the world, unless you're Muslim, look at, Isaac being on that altar, And like you had said with, religions, we're fighting over stories. A lot of
that
times.
Are similar in nature.
Yeah, very similar.
So that's something to talk about. This is like on this topic of conversation, but it is ancestral healing because it goes way back, right? So you can actually pull from, if you really, I don't know, you maybe you've learned this, but like the gods of ancient Egypt and ancient Rome, a lot of similarities between the names, the stories that are found in the books of all of these religions. They're all intertwined. And so just like we all came from the same place, at one point it's all from the same place.
Right.
It has to be. It all came from the same place, and then people settled in different areas and started to have different belief systems. But once we can take it back to the understanding that it all came from the same place, we would start to understand each other a little bit more.
Right.
There is no other explanation for it.
Totally. I mean, like, it's really, there's so many overlaps of names from, like, Babylonian culture, Akkadian, all these different ones. Like, for instance, one of the Hebrew months is Tammuz, and that's a god or something in a completely different religion. And it's, or culture, I should say. And it's so fascinating because you're right. We all come from the source.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. I mean, we can all call it whatever we want to. I often tell everybody what I understand, at least for me, is that we all have it right and we all have it wrong.
I love that. Shows the duality, right?
But it is going to be what it's going to be. And it's not different for every single one of us. We all, I mean, it's like, I don't know. Anyway, it's very interesting to talk about. But let's see. Where did I talked about, I think, okay. So I think I talked a little bit about a couple of the reasons why I practice ancestral healing, but I think I left a couple out. Okay. So I just thought I'd circle back to those. So I talked about self-healing, and then we talked quite at length about collective healing. I think we've hit that one pretty good. But I did talk a little bit about this idea that that I believe when you send healing to individuals, it also helps to heal part of their soul. And so, whatever happened to them when they were here, whether you believe in past lives or not, every one of us at least once was here in this human body. And as a human person, we make mistakes because we have a human brain and we have a human conditioning. If you haven't read the 4 agreements, I'll plug it here. I plug it everywhere I go. Read it. It will help you understand the perspective of how we become a conditioned person based on how we're raised. And that's why we're a sovereign being. Any two of us have the exact same experience here on Earth. But that means that as humans, we're making mistakes. And so there's soul healing that needs to happen for those souls that are on the other side, heaven, wherever your people are going. When they cross over, those people, when they were in the human body, made soul mistakes, things that hit their soul. Right. And so when we heal those things here energetically and send them light and love, now I have a great story around this one. Because when I started doing this, I actually went to a tarot card reader, don't know his name. It was in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I was on my way back from a journey. But I went to him, and this is the first time I ever learned this idea of how to do some ancestral healing. And he told me that I had some karmic things happening, like I was stuck in this karmic loop, and that I should start doing this ancestral healing. And at the very basic level, I learned that you should do mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, great grandma, great grandpa on both sides of your family. And so I was like, wow, this is cool. So I come home and he told me I can do it energetically, and you can. Okay. So I did rock gardens for the people in my family. So you've seen these rock gardens before where people build memorials basically to people. Have you seen them? Like on the beach?
I have not, actually. I would love
Well, they do them in Florida. Like if you go down to the Keys area, you'll see them along the beaches where there is rock. So, but people do it there. That you'll see them in the mountains sometimes. Like anywhere people can find rocks and it's like a beautiful place, they'll stop and they'll do these. And basically, they're building memorials for somebody who's passed significant to them. So I decided to do that with stones that I had here based on what this gentleman was saying that would help me. And so I did. I sent them, I forgave them for anything that I knew about. And one of the people was my grandma on my dad's side. There was a lot of things that happened in my family, and she was in a situation with my grandpa that wasn't always a great one. And so when I sent her this healing, I have these irises that my grandma planted here many years before she died. When we first built the house, she planted these irises for me. And the irises bloomed for many, many years. We've been here for 20 years now, over that. And they bloomed for many years, and then they stopped about 5 years ago. maybe even a little longer. They completely stopped blooming. They would come up like the green part, but never a flower.
Wow.
And so that year that I did the ancestral healing, a week later, one iris bloomed.
What?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So I love to share that story. Now this year I did some healing with my I have 3 people that I consider grandma. One is not, ancestral by lineage, but she is my grandma. So I asked them, like, okay, now send me some flowers. I'll be darned if I didn't see yesterday. There's 3 of them.
Oh my goodness.
Blooming in those. They didn't bloom for the last 2 years because it had been 2 years since, so they only bloomed like the 1 year, the 1 flower, and then nothing. And now I have 3 after doing this healing. So listen, folks, that's my experience with it, is that this energy is, they're receiving it, and somehow energetically they're able to respond that way as a synchronicity, as a sign saying, hey, listen, I received that. Thank you for the love. So I feel like they're receiving soul healing on the other side. That long story is to tell you they're receiving soul healing on the other side. And they're sometimes able to send that back in something that you would understand. So when you do the ancestral healing, just watch for synchronicity, because they could be there for you.
I often,
so that's,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go.
I was going to say, I often look in nature, and most of the time when a butterfly appears, it's an answer from my granny. Like, I'll share this part. The week that she passed, I was in hospice with her the whole time, and then, I would always go back to her house at, sometime in that week, Every single day, there was this, green moth, butterfly looking, beautiful being, I should say. It literally would stay in one spot right by the door. And it stayed there the whole week. Right when my granny passed, it happened to be on a Shabbat, which was very interesting. I came back the next day, and that moth or butterfly literally had left. And I thought that was so interesting, because the way, when it came back, it literally came back when we actually had the service for her.
Mm-hmm.
And that meant so much to me. I knew that even though my granny was not there in the physical, being that I knew her as, she was still sending, signs all over the place, just like that one.
Absolutely. Absolutely, they can do that. Yeah. Yeah, it is, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, there's just, that's a beautiful story.
Thank you.
Of that healing energy that we can do, and that they can produce. And what happens when you start to heal that is you actually can start to heal disease, and that's where that 7 years back and 7 years forward sort of comes in, is that you can start to heal destructive patterns in your family history by healing them, by sending them forgiveness. Now that heals you for forgiving, and then it heals them by sending them forgiveness, and it heals your family lines, because you can start to eliminate things like depression and alcoholism and things that live in your family line for years and years and years, and nobody understands why. That stuff is genetic. But it's really emotionally based stuff, because we don't do enough healing of all of those things, and then we pass that down through our family. So again, if we were all doing the healing and we were all at that frequency of love, we wouldn't have any reason to have a lot of those diseases even in our in our frame of reference anymore.
True.
So, and then the last, I did talk about earth healing a little bit already. So earth healing is that where you're healing your ancestral land. And when we start to do that healing with the ancestors that lived on our land before, we can also do some healing with the actual land that we live on.
Yeah.
Because our lands are also ancestral.
Very true.
You know, many of us live, you know, there's families that in other parts of the world have lived in the same land for hundreds of years. And so imagine how deep the ancestral roots go for them there in that piece of earth that they own. And so if we all started to do some healing with the earth, and certainly just doing that kind of healing is not the only thing we need to do to heal the earth, but that's one of the ways that we can at least start to heal things that are held on land that we live on. So that can heal things like people who maybe weren't able to make the cross. So again, this is a belief system where, you know, it depends upon what you believe, but I certainly have seen enough evidence in my lifetime of things that are not explainable, right. that are happening here on Earth, where souls are trapped, and we need to help them. And we can do that by doing this ancestral healing of the earth land that we live on. So one of the ways I believe you can do it.
That's amazing. I love that. You know, something that comes to mind actually, looking at the earth, but I'm actually feeling stuff in regards to the moon. Since today is Moon Day, it's Monday. Like, what is your your take on the moon in regards to ancestral healing?
That's interesting. All the things that I do with the moon, I have not really, you know, I don't know if this is going to answer your question, Katrielle, but you know, there are people who practice because we all came from there, you know, like practice, we all came from the stars. So people practice connection or ancestral healing with their ties to the other dimensions, the other things. So like some people believe and have connections to things like the Pleiadians, and are doing ancestral healing with those dimensions or any other dimension that you feel connected to. You cannot do it wrong. And so for me, moon practice is very connected to healing the divine feminine. And so, and we talked about the Mother Mary archetype a minute ago, and so that you could connect back to this healing of the divine feminine when you start to heal, because that's, for me, it's a very feminine energy. We all are equal parts, so let's not forget that. We're equal parts of divine feminine, equal parts of divine masculine. And so the divine feminine, the crone archetype in particular, has been wounded for many, 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 many moons, thousands of them. Okay, the story of how the Bible was put together, and why some of those with Constantine, and why some of the what would have been the Gospels of Jesus, Mary Magdalene and Mother Mary, are completely missing, and many, many other women who were a part of making that journey for Christianity to split off from Judaism. Did I say that right? Judaism?
So. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So when we think about that, why are all these things missing? why are all these female characters, role players in this history that caused that to happen? Because religion is also bound up with history. Things happened in history to make people change their views on things, and that's why we have all of these different views. So the person who put together that Bible was Constantine. He brought all of these groups of people who had these gospels, and they decided what was going to go in that book. And that book has been looked at now for over 2,000 years. Well, not quite. Yeah. Oh, well, about, yeah, because it was 300 years after Jesus' death that even happened. It even occurred. So we have this book that's missing all of these goddess archetypes, all of these women, other than stories that men have written. And so moon practice for me, taking this back, is really about, healing. Women resonated with the moon forever. The red tent was a moon practice. Our cycles we cycle with the moon. And so that's why it's so connected to divine feminine healing for me. And the thing is that once we can recognize that these things are missing, and we can recognize that we took this wise woman, women were burned at the stake, killed for their healing gifts, like on and on and on throughout history after that happened. And so the moon practice and healing, all of those different things that have been missing from society. So now we're awakening to that practice again here. And we're starting to do its inner work. It's self-healing, but we're starting to recognize that that's something that we haven't been treated that with respect. And we're starting to look again to women as healers, nurturers, lovers. And we're starting as women to look at other women and say, I want to be with you, not against you.
Right.
Because we also created this, not for other reasons, when women had to go back to work, that really threw things out of proportion. Now, I'm not saying women shouldn't stay at work. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that it wounded some of the things that we were able to understand. We didn't shift enough the responsibilities of the women with the divine masculine. We didn't shift that enough. And so the divine masculine sort of stayed the way it was, but women had to continue to do what they were doing before, and then add these other layers on. So we're starting to awaken. And with moon practice being one of the big ways that we're bringing things back to more of a balanced state.
I agree. I feel like the moon is a really powerful goddess, and even through what we feel, like our emotions, like how far even through our emotions we can go back into our ancestral line, and it's quite an honor to be doing this conversation today on Memorial Day, on Moon Day. It's incredible.
Yes, it absolutely is. I want to thank you so much for having me to talk about this, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you
sure.
so much. I would even love to do another, because we just have so much to talk about, It's
there
incredible.
Is, but I mean, there's so much work to do, right? But I'm trying to get away from the word work. That's a whole nother podcast.
Right.
But there's so much forward movement to do now, and there's so much momentum behind it, which I think is the most beautiful thing about all of this, is that, every day we encounter new souls that are starting to awaken, whether it be to different energies or to different practices that understand, again, that it really is about healing them.
Right.
And I think like the message that you'll be sending here with this podcast, I'm sure will resonate with that across the board.
100%.
At the end of the day, it really is so much about healing things within us that will help us get to where we need to be.
Yes.
Collectively.
Well, you're always welcome on Energy Speaks podcast. And I am in so much gratitude, thank you so much.
Thank you so much until we meet again.
Yes. And on our next episode, we will also have another Kristin on here, speaking about her journey with yoga and Buddhism and, her connection with spirit. So thank you again, Kristin Wolf. And thank you, Divine Beautiful Souls. This is Catriel, over and out.